Welcome to a football show, Paul Karski podcast. Matchup here, I guess, the NFL Combine 2025 brought to you by Seekers Beverages and
Ten Sports.
That is correct. We had the Titans go today, of course, on Tuesday, day number 1 here with Mike Borgonzi, general manager, and Brian Callahan, head coach. We're going to hear from those guys today in just a few minutes. They talked a lot about arm strength, a lot about quarterbacks. Of course, that was a major topic. Is that the number one thing for you today? We'll get into other things, but is that the number one thing for you today?
I mean, I think it was the number one topic. I don't think it was the most interesting thing they said. Maybe we'll save that for at the end.
Tease, as we say.
Yeah, tease.
So we'll do that coming up. We talked about Travis Hunter, talked about how much they would be offered for the first pick. Not in detail, of course. They didn't give us any detail. I thought Mike Borgonzi today, very careful with his words at the podium. He was very clearly being very succinct. Didn't want to give anything away. Came into it like a plan like that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to play for you guys. And again, make sure you check out all of our great local sponsors, of course, Paul Karski podcast and Football Sports. If you are watching, if you normally listen to Paul and I on a football show, make sure you're checking out Paul Karski podcast on his YouTube page as well as Paul Karski.
And if you normally watch Paul Karski podcast, make sure you're watching a football show and everything on 440 Sports.
There you go. And shout out to our producer, JT, who's just off camera hanging out here.
Very handsome man in a plaid flannel.
Well, as is tradition. All right, so here was Brian Callahan. This is a mashup of a few cuts from Brian Callahan. Of course, today he talked about Shedeur Sanders' arm strength. Speaking of JT, who's obsessed with Shedeur Sanders' arm strength. Arm strength, a big topic of conversation today about whether or not he can, how much they value that. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. He's also going to talk about the off-the-field interviews in terms of what they're trying to learn, what they're trying to gain from these guys, what they're all that good stuff that happens sort of behind the scenes at the combine. So here was a couple of clips from Brian Callahan on Tuesday talking about Shedeur Sanders evaluating quarterbacks, player interviews, and of course arm strength as well.
Yeah, it's one of those qualities, those three qualities: decision making, timing, accuracy. And scouting quarterbacks is not an exact science. You can see over the years that there's been really quality players that you think had it that maybe didn't show up when it actually came time, and then there's ones that you weren't sure if they did and they show up and they play well. So yeah, those are things that we have to do our due diligence on and make sure that we're trying to unturn all the stones from the tape, from the person, from the workouts. All that stuff is a part of the process to try to make the best decision we can when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks in general. Yeah, I think that there's a requisite arm strength, right? You have to be able to make a certain amount of throws down the field, outside the numbers, tight windows, those things. But then the other part of it is the ability to anticipate and to make the decision that puts the ball in the right window. Those things all matter. So again, you don't have to have the strongest arm in the entire draft, but there's a threshold. There's a minimum requisite, I think, is the best way to put it. But the rest of that stuff matters, I think, just as much. Your ability to anticipate, to throw on time, and to throw accurately, and you mix that with the arm strength portion. So there's a lot of different ways it looks. There's a lot of different ways quarterbacks can play. So I hesitate to fit one bucket is more important than the other, but the whole picture has to fit. There's sort of a two-pronged approach, right? There's the evaluation of the tape and what they've shown over their careers, and then there's learning about them as a person. How do they see football? How do they interact with their teammates? How do they interact in your building when you bring them in? So all those touch points now are starting. So we've got the evaluation of the tape, and now you're trying to figure out how that tape matches up with the person and their knowledge of football, their knowledge of schematics, and where those things are good or where they might need to improve. And that's what this next, from now until the draft essentially is about, with the combine being the starting point, and you have your 30 visits in your spot. They have pro days, there's private workouts. All of those things factor into the process as you get closer to the draft. But right now is trying to find out as much as we can about the person as opposed to just them throwing in a workout. It's how you find out about who they are as a human, and that part is, I would say, almost equally as important as the tape is. There's guys that perform really well on tape and they don't fit what you're looking for from a football makeup, and that's what you're trying to find out. That's always the hardest part. It's hard because you don't have enough time. You wish you could just have 6 months with these guys and be with them every day and you'd find out a whole lot. But we're limited in our touch points, and you try to take advantage of all of them. But no, this part is another phase of the evaluation process, and it's February. We have all the way till end of April to do this, and that part is important, and we need to make sure we nail that part as well.
Uploading all right. You want to okay, all right. All right, so arm strength seems to be a big topic of conversation. Paul, your thoughts on enough arm strength? I think is one of the phrases that they use.
And Borgonzi talked the same way, very clearly said he's got plenty of arm strength. Maybe he has plenty of arm strength. Maybe they just want to really think he's got plenty of arm strength. It's a gamesmanship season. I mean, Brian Callahan said outright, somebody asked him, can you lie directly to another GM or coach to their face during lying season? And he said, oh, yeah. So, you could certainly lie to us, and that's not much of a lie to give us a scouting report that's polished up. Borgonzi also said it's great that Cam Ward went to Incarnate Word in Washington State and Miami. Shows he learned 3 playbooks really quickly and took on leadership roles, and people followed him. Another take could be, well, the guy should have, with his talent, led a team to 3 national championships and been an institution here instead of floating around, right? So they polished up both the quarterbacks. They want everybody to love both the quarterbacks. Love these guys. Come pride them on us.
Yeah. And look, we'll talk about the trade. We'll talk about Travis Hunter. We'll talk about a few other things here in just a second. But yeah, I agree. I think must lie season. I think it was interesting. He kind of did was asked about the line thing, and he kind of laughed at first because he doesn't. It's not in his. I don't think it's in his DNA.
That's pretty on. Yeah.
I don't think he's in his DNA to tell a lot of lies, but he recognizes he's very, very competitive, and he recognizes that they're in must lie season right now, which is clearly the case.
He's also not the guy at the front of needing to do the lying. That's more of a GM.
He talked about that as well afterward in our sort of Polis side there in the breakaway. He said, look, I will make, they're not going to call third down plays. That's my job. I'm going to call third down plays. I'll be involved in the evaluation process and with the players that we're going to pick. But at the end of the day, it's the front office that's going to make the choices about some of these players. So let's hear from the front office. This was Mike Borgonzi also talking a little bit about Shedeur Sanders. You referenced that arm strength there, but also just what it looks like when we sit down and try to learn about these guys and get to know these guys in those private conversations, which is sort of the opaque part of this process that no one ever sees. Trying to figure out a little bit about their insight and sort of how they approach offense. So here was GM Mike Borgonzi.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly been quarterbacks over the years. To answer your question, I think he has plenty of staying. And some of the anticipatory throws sometimes make up for lack with arm strength. Can certainly see quarterbacks over the years that are able to do that because they anticipate better. And a lot of that has to do with field instincts too. If a player has a really good field vision and instincts and have a feel for it to anticipate some of those throws. There's been successful quarterbacks that really haven't had great arm talent play. So when we're doing these interviews, we're really trying to drill down on the tape a little bit. So the coaches are in there as well. So if there's any questions that we might have on the football intelligence piece, the coaches are making cut-ups of that film. So you get a good feel, even though it's 18 minutes, you get a good feel kind of what their foundation is. In terms of knowledge of, either the offense or the defense. But at the end of the day, we have to make the best decision at this point for the Titans. And if we need, taking a quarterback is the most important thing right now, then we'll do that. But we have to go through this process here. So this is like one touch point in the process. We've gone through the whole evaluation part. Now we'll finally get to sit down and meet with these guys and talk with them. We'll have pro days, we'll have 30-day visits. So we have to go through the whole process really to make that decision.
All right, Titans General Manager Mike Borgonzi there, both at the podium for the national folks and then with us to the side. Any final thoughts on quarterback? I think Brian Callahan and Borgonzi at the Senior Bowl were I don't know if they meant to do this, but they came off as less enthusiastic about the quarterback situation at that point very early in the process. Callahan famously said, look, this is not a Joe Burrow situation. It's not this draft for us. Thoughts after hearing him today?
Well, I think, I appreciate the candor where they're saying, maybe it's a quarterback. Maybe we fall in love with a quarterback and we go. But we're not going to force, which I think is the sensible approach. And they're saying things about the sensible approach. But he also said, look, the board is set. And out of all of this stuff, it's not the permanent board. But I kind of tried to get him to say, how far will a guy move? And he didn't say, 5 to 7 spots barring a big injury. But he said, not far. All right. So one of these quarterbacks bowls them over and how they get to know him is not moving forward. Do we think one of these quarterbacks is at 1 right now? I certainly don't. Do we think he's at 5? Maybe. Is he moving 5 spots? I don't.
Because of a conversation in private or medical evaluation.
Yeah.
It seems unlikely. The other element here is that the entire evaluation of these quarterbacks, they did say they wanted. I think Callahan said this. He wished Shador Sanders would be throwing, but it doesn't really affect his evaluation of him too much.
Yeah.
He did call it. I believe he called it phase 1, right? He said the board is set now in phase 1 of the board. They will adjust it, of course, after this week. And I think that was the right quote, which is not much, not a lot, maybe a little bit. These players were looped. I do think that's lost on a lot of fans and sometimes media too, that the tape is what decides this stuff. And they stick to that by and large through most of the process.
Yes. And so I emphasize this every year. When you hear reports from national media or from whoever that so and so is moving, what you're hearing is people are finding out where people are on the board, and it's higher or lower than we anticipate, which is not really movement, it's education. So we're hearing that a guy is actually ranked higher than we thought or lower than we thought. That's not movement. That's not movement. They have them where they have them. We're just finding out where they have them, and it's different than we anticipate.
And one of the things I think you guys just heard from both Callahan and Borgonzi is that the off the field is kind of separate. They're on parallel tracks, I think, is how they described it. And I'm reminded of T'Vondre Sweat. Like T'Vondre Sweat, let's use him as an example. They probably evaluated him on the tape, his physical abilities, and said, this is where he is. He's this good. Who knows where that was on their board, roughly where he got drafted. But then they went and did a ton of work. Like they took the whole crew down there and ran to the whole office, and they went down there and worked with him to make sure they got to know him way more than even just here at the combine. So that's one of those rare occasions where it probably solidified where they had him already ranked at whatever 25, 30.
We don't have to move him back because of weight
Right.
concerns,
Right.
because of personality concerns, because he's going to get in trouble. Like,
What do you think of Travis Hunter? Brian Callahan said he's going to start as a cornerback. That's how he sees him starting. But that Borgonzi echoed this, very unique player. Of course, all stuff we know already. But that he could play both ways. This is a guy who's never done. There's no modern comp for this player. And even I think you mentioned the less than 200-pound things at number 1 overall got brought up as well. So you can see their faces. It's not apprehension, it's excitement, but it's also we want to get to know him a little bit. We want to see what he can do.
yeah, I'm not surprised about the corner. That's what I've been hearing, and I think that's what the vast majority of people here think. And so we'll see. I kind of a Abdul Carter versus Travis Hunter thing, depending on what Cleveland and the Giants have to say about it. If the Titans in fact drop down, and depending on that, I didn't hear what the Giants said today. Andrew Berry of the Browns said, it's really early to have a sense about the trade market. And I just asked Pete Carroll, and he kind of laughed me off. Way early to even start to think about what the trade market's going to be. So when the Titans and the Rams talked here in 2016 and began to ferment that trade, that was unusual. That something got started that early. Most people think it's too early to get a sense of what it's worth and all.
Borgonzi was asked to sort of explain a little bit more what he means by generational talent. Do you think that Carter and Hunter are going to fit into that category for them right now?
I think, again, more gamesmanship. Are they generational talents? I mean, it's a sliding scale. By the answer he gave, yes. But I think he gives an answer that fits generational talent again to say, oh, yeah, there's plenty of generational talent here. And we've said we're not going to pass generational talent. So if you want this pick, you better come and try it from our hand, because we're not going to give it up because we see generational talent. And we've said we're not passing generational talent.
The thing they said today leads into what we're trying to convince folks to come get this pick. I think you asked at the very end about getting blown away. Is that?
Yeah, I said, do you need to be blown away? He said, if you're coming up for a quarterback, it costs a lot to come up for a quarterback. And if it's something, the number one, we have the number 1 pick. It costs, the expectation is it costs a lot to get the number 1 pick. And so that's our expectation.
What's interesting about this entire draft class is how much value, of course, is in the middle rounds, and we'll find out a lot more about those guys coming up in a couple of days. All the players will now go over the course of the next few days. Obviously, Hunter will go. I believe Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are both going at the same time. They're going to be talking at the exact same
Yeah,
time.
and they won't put them at the same time. They're in the same half-hour window. Somebody will get the first 15.
Okay.
Somebody will get the
Right.
second.
What if you're asking questions of Travis Hunter based on what you heard from the Titans today? How would you word your questions?
Oh, I don't know. It seems that most people, and certainly team with the number one pick, view you as a cornerback first. Are you comfortable with that? I think he's going to be completely, he's not going to contradict the teams that might rather.
Anything else? Anything else from Dave?
Yeah, well, no, I thought the biggest thing today wasn't pertaining to the draft at all. I thought it was pertaining to free agency. I've been pondering, Mike Borgonzi said, that they were going to be selective and supplemental with free agency. And I've been thinking, this roster's got a lot of holes on it. You're going to have to go get a couple guys of some substance to try to patch this roster. And he said today, before I even really got to ask that question, it's going to be selective in that we might pick this one guy to go after, but if we don't get him, that doesn't mean we're automatically going for the next guy on the list. So
they like him because they like that player.
Right. So let's just pick one at random. If they like Trey Smith at guard, they might set a number on Trey Smith. He knows Trey Smith very well from being in Kansas City. And they might really want Trey Smith, put a hard sell on Trey Smith at this number with a little bit of wiggle room. But if Trey Smith resigns in Kansas City or goes somewhere else, it doesn't mean they're going to guard number 2. And they might say, all right, well, and we've got 3 or 4 guys like that we're going to chase. Hopefully we land 2 of them. But if we don't, it doesn't mean we're ticking down a list. And I think that was significant news to me in the way that they're going to approach it.
Is that how you would do it? That's the horizontal element and the vertical element of the board, right? Of a draft board, but it's similar for agency, right? You're saying they like these 3 guys at this position, but if it goes below that, we're not just automatically taking the next guy. We'll slide over to another position. That's similar to how they draft board.
It's kind of similar to what they did last year, where clearly they wanted Autry and Aziz back. Didn't get them, and then seemed like they turned to Ridley. But this sounded more like maybe if we don't get this guy, we're not going to just go not only to the next guy at the position, but we're not going to necessarily have plan Bs and Cs. We're going to target some guys, and if we don't get those guys, all right, we're getting these specific guys that we really love, and we're not going to settle.
Along with the free agency stuff, I believe it was Mike Borgonzi also talked about we're going to have 2 quarterbacks. We probably are going to go get a second quarterback. Will Levis is on the roster, of course, right now. But if they go sign a free agent quarterback, it doesn't preclude them from drafting quarterback at number 1 or anywhere else in the top first round or the rest of the draft for that matter. So interesting to note that I did talk to some folks around Atlanta because there was some news today, not news, but reports today that the Falcons are going to keep Kirk Cousins, or at least that's what the general manager said today. Some of the reports. I talked to some folks that said that ain't happening. This is the guy who they're going to figure out a way for him to get out, but it's probably, I believe, March 17th is the date that he's due a ton of money. I think I'll quote me on that, ballpark it. And I said, so March 16th, and somebody said, yeah, that's when we expect to move on some way, stand form from Kirk Cousins. So that's a guy who could be going to Cleveland or could be available for a Russell Wilson type deal for the Titans if they want to go get somebody that they think is serviceable for a year to let Cam Ward sit or Will Levis.
And Borgonzi said, signing a free agent doesn't preclude them from taking a quarterback in the draft, which is fine. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. They're not giving anybody a Kirk Cousins-like deal. And all these guys are relatively old, so they're not long-term solutions outside of maybe Darnold. But my thinking is there's another element to this. Whether you've got a free agent quarterback or not, if you want to be sure of getting Cam Ward or Shador Sanders, you got to get in front of other teams that want Cam Ward or Shador Sanders. The way to assure yourself of that is getting the number 1. Or maybe the Titans on when you trade the Cleveland spot. Well, Cleveland may be one of the teams that wants them. But if you're the Jets or the Raiders, you got to get ahead of the Browns and the Giants to do it. It doesn't matter what the Titans would be taking there. It matters with the Browns and the Giants. Or for the Giants, it matters what the Browns are doing. Browns, it may matter, like you don't want somebody to trade into the Titan spot to do that. So it's about other teams. It's not about
I think they're in a pretty good spot. I think they know it, and I think they're comfortable there. I don't know if they're comfortable with the draft pick in that spot, but I think they're comfortable where they are right now, at least after a couple of days. Lots of players coming up this week. We'll have all kinds of coverage for you. PaulKarski.com, of course. You got the Paul Karski podcast on the YouTube page and across all podcast applications of choice, brought to you by
Zen Sports. Sign up using TN Paul. You get extra benefits.
There you go. And a football show, Paul and I normally every Monday, but this is, of course, special coverage here. Nick Suss and I will be back on Friday. Of course, this week, that'll be after we get to talk to Travis Hunter and Shimmer Sanders and Cam Ward. So we're going to do a live show on Friday. We'll have coverage for you, of course, across the rest of the week as well. So
I'll be potting on Thursday, and I'll be potting Sinkers. Didn't mean to step on Sinkers' toes. Didn't mean to step on Sinkers' toes. Drink up. I'll be potting on Thursday and stringing together, maybe independent of that, short interviews with some media colleagues.
just various distinguished dignitaries in the NFL world. What is your beverage of choice late night and come? Sinkers beverages could provide our audience.
I mean, I like a nice old fashioned if I'm in the right kind of mood.
That's a good one. I had a nice Kismetic Italian Pilsner last night at a place called Bluebeard. Good restaurant. Check it out. It's quality. And you don't need
Bluebeard or Blackbeard?
Bluebeard is the restaurant. It's good.
Black.
I'm going to a place called Vita tonight. It's excellent. Check it out. Food is good in this town.
I'm aware. This guy who's here for the first time ever is telling me, who comes twice a year, to check out the restaurant scene as if I don't eat.
I question. I'm gonna go bet at Zen Sports and go buy some drinks and sinkers, and of course subscribe to all the podcast app. We're gonna teach you about food while we're here. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
I like that.